Hello everybody, how are you doing? I hope your studies are going smoothly. Welcome back and welcome to this video. It's going to be one of those exam style revision videos where you can pause the video, try some questions and then come back and I will talk through. The topic of focus today is going to be paper 2, it's approaches to psychology, and we're going to look at origins and the role of Wilhelm Wundt. Let's crack on. Right, there they are, a lovely set of questions. You've got marks there, you've got timings, everything you need to have a go. So do pause the video at this point, come back in a minute when you've had a go, and I'll talk through them. Off you go. Right, hopefully that went okay. Let's talk through. Who's regarded as the father of psychology? You've got 4 big names there. Hopefully you can identify that it's Wilhelm Wundt. Okay, according to the popular wisdom anyway, but we might come back to that in the discussion later. So that's a nice easy mark to start us off. You can probably bank a whole minute there in terms of exam time, because that should only take you a few seconds to do. Right, explain introspection. So for 2 marks, introspection basically was, Wundt would give them, the participants, some kind of stimulus. It might be like a physical thing to touch, like a rock or something. It might be something to listen to, like a tone he might play. So some kind of stimulus. And what participants had to do is they had to reflect on their experience of that stimulus. So he encouraged them to systematically reflect on their internal experiences in response to a specific stimulus. Yeah? Things like, sensation, perception, those sort of areas. Okay? But systematic reflection on their experience. All right. We're now talking about the role of Wundt in the development of psychology. Okay, so what did he do? There's lots of things you could talk about here. You'll get credit for talking about how he pioneered the method of introspection. You could briefly mention what that is, but remember that isn't really the focus of the question here. It's on what did Wundt do for psychology. So he introduced introspection. He set up the first experimental psychology lab. You might know that was in Leipzig in 1879. You could say just that he's the father of psychology. But I would encourage you to say a bit more than that. Why is he the father of psychology? What did he do? You could say that he used or kind of pioneered the role of structuralism in psychology. He was all about kind of breaking complex experiences and stimuli down so that they can be studied, arguably for the first time in Western psychology. There's lots of things you could say there, but it's only 2 marks, so pick a couple, try and have a specific example, some specific terminology, like introspection, like the experimental lab in Leipzig. Okay. Right, on to a bigger question. It's the same really, other than it's 6 marks. Slightly different focus here because it's about not just psychology generally, but the emergence of psychology as a science. So what we need to do here in talking about what Wundt did is kind of link it into how that's scientific. So Wundt set up the first experimental psychology lab. Okay, well, therefore he's pioneered the role of the experimental method in psychology, or he's introduced controlled experimental methods into psychology. Yeah, that's the science link, isn't it? What else did he do? So introspection. So introspection was a systematic way of studying internal experiences that hadn't been studied before, really. Introducing, again, those controlled and systematic scientific methods into psychology. Yeah? So you could talk about introspection, talk about the role of that lab that he set up. You could talk about how he broke down, so talk about reductionism now, and if you've done issues and debates, then you'll be aware of reductionism and the role that plays in science, so that we can break down these complex phenomena like sensation and perception and all these different things into something that is studyable in a controlled lab kind of setting. Yeah. So whatever you say about Wundt in this type of question, if it specifically says about psychology as a science, try to explain to the examiner what's scientific about it, yeah? Talking about things like control, systematic, replication, objectivity, those kind of things where you can. All right, now we want to discuss Wundt's role in the development of psychology. So we do need to know what he's done, but it's not really kind of a knowledge question. We're talking about, how important was he? So different routes you could go here. And to some extent, this covers the next question, but we'll kind of roll it into one a little bit. So to discuss his role, you could, if you've talked about, how he's introduced the scientific method, you could then kind of discuss that by saying, but how scientific is it? Yeah, remember that what he was doing, if you talked about introspection especially, what he's doing is getting participants to kind of self-report on their own experiences. Which, yes, is useful because we can't access that information otherwise because it's, it's inside them, we can't see it. But how objective is that? How replicable is that? Yeah? Other people tried to replicate his methods and they couldn't really do it. They couldn't get the same results. They couldn't do it in the same way because it's a very subjective thing, isn't it? If I asked you to, I don't know, where are you sat? Maybe at a desk, maybe on your bed. Touch something nearby you. Stroke the wall, whatever. How does that feel? Yeah, that's probably going to feel slightly different or be reported slightly differently by different people. It's not really objective. It's not replicable. So that could be the source of your discussion. Yes, he contributed, scientific controlled methods, but maybe it wasn't scientific. You could also go down the route of, that what I've said already is probably enough for the 4 marks. So we'll kind of roll this into the next one. Other points you could talk about, you could actually bring in, yes, Wundt was important, but was he the only one? No, he wasn't. Wundt might be the only one named on the spec, but, I'm sure some of you will have done some wider reading, or your teachers might have talked about other psychologists. You might have heard of people like William James, who was an American philosopher, kind of turned psychologist, who, Wundt set up the first lab in 1879, and we often talk, at A-level about 1879 as being this key kind of, that's when psychology started. And, okay, to some extent, but Wundt was actually teaching psychology years before that. In 1875, William James was teaching experimental psychology, not just psychology, but an experimental psychology course in America. I think he was at Harvard or somewhere like that. 1875, 4 years before, the textbook for A-level tells you that psychology started. Yeah, not just psychology, experimental psychology. So you could discuss Wundt's role by talking about the role of people like William James. Even if you have never heard of William James, and if you're a psychology student and you've never heard of him, look him up. Please do. Read some of his work. Anyway, if you've never heard of him, you do have other things to talk about from the course, yeah? Okay, Wundt maybe is an important figure in the emergence of psychologists as a science, but when you consider that his methods weren't really that scientific, and, look at what other people were doing, 10, 20 years later, look at the role of people like John Watson, Ivan Pavlov, yeah, and slightly later, Skinner. What were they doing? Arguably, what they were doing was more scientific than what Wundt did, yeah? They were doing controlled lab experiments on animals, weren't they? And their legacy is arguably more important or more applicable than what Wundt did, yeah? Yes, Wundt maybe paved the way, and this is where you might go in the discussion, yeah? Maybe they wouldn't have done what they did without some of what Wundt did. But Wundt himself, how much of a legacy has he had in terms of tangible scientific things? Arguably the behaviourists and other early psychologists have contributed more to modern psychology than Wilhelm Wundt did. Okay, so there's lots that you could discuss there. Bring in some of those other examples. All right. Okay, how did it go for you? What happened? What did you get right? What did you forget? What did you struggle with? How long did it take you? Why was that? And so what? How is this going to feed back in to your future actions and revision? Okay, I hope that went okay for you guys. I hope that was helpful. Keep it up. You got this. Let me know if you've got any questions down below, if you want to request a particular topic. I'm slowly working my way through things, but if a few people want something in particular, then I will do my best to manage that when I can. All right. Keep going, guys. Good luck. Bish bash bosh.